Thank you to you, Sammy, for doing us the honors there with Hello God by Dolly Parton. Yet again, a very good afternoon and welcome to another exciting edition of your favorite business development program on Radio Masterclass. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to us today by Goyle. Goyle, they say good energy. Goyle, Yenara, Yedia. My name, as always, is Yabana Fred. I'm happy to be your host for today's edition of Masterclass. Today's edition of Masterclass is one that also comes with some kind of mixed feelings. Today we continue with our conversation on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And here with us back in the studio is our favorite resource person on this subject matter, Martin Atafin, who is also the CEO of AfriConsult. Today is our last conversation on this topic area, and we hope that you'll be able to pick up something, or hopefully you've picked up something in previous conversations to be able to help our businesses and how we manage our people. We've always said here that these days the language in the business terrain is changing from the processes, from the techniques, from the physical things to the people. The people. Now it's about the people. If you treat the people well, they will treat your business well. So diversity, equity, and inclusion becomes an important conversation. Last week, we talked about some of the tidbits that we had learned in earlier conversations. We talked about equity, not equality. We talked about the fact that if you do not intentionally include, you will unintentionally exclude. And one of the things that I picked up last week was also that the lines that divide us are not as strong as the lines that bind us. This one is from Cory Booker. Cory Booker, that's a statement by Cory Booker. Think about it. The lines that divide us, the things that we think, as for this one, I can never forgive it. We can never marry from that place. You can never work with those kind of people. We can never accept that kind of behavior. Well, Cory is saying that the lines that divide us are not as strong as the lines that bind us. And when I thought about it, I said to myself, I've got some pretty deep dividing lines. I've come to understand some pretty deep dividing lines in this conversation. But one of the strongest things that binds all of us is that we're here on this earth together. Whether we like it or not, we're stuck here. So if we're going to live and we're going to survive and we're going to coexist, at some point we need to begin to work together. Great. So that's my understanding of the lines that bind us being stronger. But perhaps when we get interactive, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the lines that bind us being stronger than the lines that divide us. But today, we go into that conversation yet again. We kind of round it up, and we're going to put an icing on the cake by getting perspectives from Africa. We've got some resource persons across the continent, South Africa to be specific, who are going to be joining us and share some real life case scenarios with us so that we can sort of make the conversation a bit richer, bring it down to the ground so that we're not only talking to you about theories or things that are in books, but things that people are facing every day. And when we get interactive, we'd like to hear from you as well so that you add your practical experiences of what's happening in your workplaces, what are the tolerance issues you're dealing with, which ones have to be dealt with by policy, which ones have had to go to the disciplinary committee, who's doing what, and how are you handling it. Let's talk about these things, because if we talk about them, then we know. When we know, then we formulate policy or process to be able to handle them. Because whether we like it or not, we're stuck here together. So we might as well make it right. Uncle Martin, you're welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you very much.
We're rounding it up today.
Yes.
But you've got quite a bit of content for us.
Yes.
So I'm going to try not to talk too much. Just take us through our content. When we get interactive, our listeners can be a part of it.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, please talk to us.
Sure. Thank you very much. I like what you were talking about yes. The lines that divide us, not as strong as
the lines that bind us.
The lines that bind us. Yes. In the last 2 weeks, we also indicated that, look, everyone has some unconscious bias. We are programmed to prefer people who are like us, or sound like us, or who want to be like us. So we actually gravitate towards that angle, but we just need to pay attention to it. When you're in an organization and then you find certain microaggressions, then you realize that, yes, there is some work to do. The microaggressions will be the everyday verbal and non-verbal or environmental slights, maybe snubs that may not even be intentional, or sometimes very loud insults, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate derogatory or negative messages. So basically you find that when you are in the minority, so to speak, that is when you feel it most, and that is when your effort to do work actually goes down. So we have to intentionally try and create a situation where we can be able to let everyone work in an environment that makes them feel comfortable and excited to be there. So, like we said, today we're going to look at two key things within DIB. First, we'll look at the perspectives from Africa, and that should encourage us to be able to do more. And then, if we manage to get Sam Kello Bloom online, then he will speak to us about how it works in South Africa. South Africa, particularly because South Africa itself is one of the most diverse nations that you can find. And so he can tell us the experience. And then if we have some time, we can talk about how teams work within a DIB environment.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Brilliant. Let's go straight to it then.
Super. So with Africa, Africans are diverse in terms of physical appearance. Some are white, some are black, some are in the middle somewhere. In terms of languages.
Yet still, some say they are not Africans.
And some say they are not Africans, and that is even another minority. Yeah, I mean, in terms of languages and even dialects and different cultures.
Yes.
I mean, there are about the region of 1,500 different dialects and languages that you can find in Africa. Can you imagine? 1,500. That alone is enough for us to raise our eyebrows and say, indeed, how can we deal with this? So the multicultural workforce is actually a reality. I mean, either within your country or because the boundaries are open, the borders are open these days, outside of the country. I mean, if you look at it from the African perspective and why we need to take this thing more seriously, now there's AFTA. So you'll be working with other organizations across your border, and then you will find differences that that may sort of kind of make your working a bit difficult, etc. Or people will cross their borders and come to your organization, and they will feel like they are being slighted because you don't understand them. So DIB is now becoming a reality that people need to look at.
I'm smiling because a typical case in point, when you work across a sub-region, you find that if you're working across Anglophone and Francophone countries,
Absolutely.
there is a culture of work in the Francophone which does not exist in the Anglophone. And it's that at a certain time of day, it doesn't matter what meeting you are in.
You have to go for
Francophone
siesta.
Brothers and sisters, they will get up and they will leave.
Yes.
And they go for their 2 or 3 hour
hours.
And they come back. It doesn't matter what meeting. It can be a board meeting. They will walk away. But it's part of what they do.
Yes.
So it's not meant to offend.
Yes.
And this is where the tolerance comes in.
That's very true.
I just thought I'd share that example.
No, but that's very true. And then when they come back, they work till 6 o'clock, till late, And I had an experience. I was doing some training across Francophone West Africa, but when I got there, they said no, we want this training to be in French.
There you go.
And by the way, we don't want someone who has learned how to speak French. We want someone who speaks like us. And, if you look at it, it's like, oh, okay. I don't speak French, so already I'm not part of it. But I would have found somebody, but they said, no. We want somebody who speaks like us. So they wanted a French West African
to deliver the training.
To deliver the training. And they were really, and I was like, okay, they are not even open to hearing somebody with a different accent and dialect. Interesting. So, I mean, that tells us that there's quite a bit of work to do within Africa. So, like the rest of Africa or the rest of the world, Africa has that kind of challenge. If you look at the World Economic Forum Gender Gap Report, they did some research with regards to economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, political empowerment. And they found out that to close the gap, the gender gap, it will take about 99.5 years over the world.
Wow.
And this was a study based on 153 countries. In sub-Saharan Africa, that is Africa south of the Sahara and north of the Limpopo, it will take 95 years. In Middle East and North Africa, it will take 140 years. And then in Western Europe, it will take about 54 years. So now when you look at the mix of maybe religion, culture, and everything, then you'll understand while it will take that long. So there's really a lot of work to do in Africa. But nevertheless, we are making some strides in Africa, basically, and especially West Africa. In particular, at boardroom level, Africa leads the world with a 25% female representation on boards.
That's an impressive statistic.
Yes, indeed. I mean, if you look at the financial institutions in Nigeria, for example, out of about a dozen commercial banks, 4 of them have female chairs of the board.
That's brilliant.
And if you come to Ghana, financial institutions, insurance institutions, you find quite a number of them that are women-led. I am associated with a fintech called Brasika Pay, and they are doing amazing things. Brasika Pay has a board chair who is female, and she's very strong and vibrant. And you can see that, I mean, when you appreciate that you have women leaders in an organization, it does a lot to the organization. So the main barriers in DIB in Africa are pretty much almost the same, but we have our own issues as well. Of course, the unconscious bias is very strong. Yeah. And then also, what is even stronger is workplace environments that are not conducive to the needs of the unrepresented. So conducive to the needs of women, conducive to the needs of PWDs, that kind of thing. And that is people with disabilities. And then also, there's a point in that research that says the lack of sponsorship of women and of people with disabilities. So it is almost like, look, you need to be able to stand with them, push them, let them appreciate it. Why? Because they are self-limiting mindsets. By the time somebody who is a PWD is going to an environment, if he's not strong and not courageous, he'd rather stay in his space because he thinks people will look at me some way. So then they don't become.
The treatment will be different.
The treatment
as we
will be
speak
different.
about the minorities and we talk
Yes.
about women and all that, I ask myself that, maybe just not to dwell too much on it, but to talk about it just for the 30 seconds. Do we have an idea under this umbrella what number of minorities we're looking at? I know there are new minorities coming up every day, and I dare say at some point there's some borderline minorities. Are people seeking to abuse the whole conversation on minority? Now, once you're a minority, everybody's looking at you and all that. But do we have an idea of, what let's say like a basket of minorities, and is there a priority of attention, if you like? Are some minorities not mentioned at all? Are some minorities? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Yes, there could be some minorities that are not mentioned at all if you look at it. But you will find that, again, for us in Ghana here, you can see that the minorities may initially be represented by a ministry, the gender ministry, which looks at gender, looks at persons with disability, and looks at children.
Right.
So there may be others that may be secondary.
So already
these
identified. The point I wanted to drive home was that there's identifiable effort.
Yes.
Number one, to identify these minorities, and number two, to provide the requisite attention and support from the state.
From the state, exactly.
From private sector as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So others may come in as secondary, because there may be a minority of Muslims in my office, because I'm Christian and probably the people I have hired are all Christians, and I may have just one Muslim, so he'll feel like, but in another environment there'll be a minority of Christians because that has also a Muslim environment, or there may be other religions that are not even talked about, and they also now fall in under the unrepresented. Yes.
Right. Okay, let's proceed, sir.
Yeah. And because of all of this, there could be some discrimination and the lack of diversity-friendly policies. So that is why we are doing this. That's why we are discussing this. That's why it has to go into organizations' policies and procedures as well as their strategy.
See, I ask this question again because for an employer who's listening to us, he needs to be able to draw the line between what my responsibility is or what my tolerance level is and what my direction is.
Yes.
I must be clear and strong about where I'm going in order for me to get people to follow me. But in doing that, I must not be ignorant or unfeeling about how the people who are following me feel. So then it becomes a delicate balancing act. But I mean, if I defer too much to every minority, then I'm going to end up going nowhere.
You won't do, you won't do your work. Yeah.
So that's the point I wanted to make. That as an employer, you're listening to us. We're not saying that shelve your direction, shelve your policy, shelve your mainstay. But we're saying that in doing that, do not go without considering certain things that the people who are following you also are characterized with. Because otherwise, then you leave them out completely. Also.
Absolutely, but as always, the first step is always the awareness. If the employer is even aware that there could be these diversity, inclusion issues, and making an effort for inclusion, that is already a major step.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So the biggest issues, particularly in Africa, are maybe the lower level of integration of women in a formal workforce. So if you cast your net around, you find that there are fewer women than men in the formal workforce. When you go into the informal, you find out that they are also have their challenges over there. It's just financial inclusion and all of those kind of things. So those discussions are going on now. People are making efforts, yes, but it's good to be aware of that. Of course, education barriers and lack of options like childcare options, etc., within people's policies and things like that it will impact the women. And currently in Africa, you are likely to find more men with bank accounts than women. So that's where you see that their inclusion is essential, especially in the non-formal environments. Yeah.
Right.
So basically, this is just to give us a picture, a perspective of what is going on in Africa and helping us to get an eye opener around DIB. It would be good to have somebody like Sam Kello give us exactly what's happening in South Africa.
Just briefly before Sam comes in, I know that institutions like the ILO are quite protective of women in the workplace.
Yes.
And so the policies across industry and even with international authority, because they've got the sovereign governments to sign up some of these things, are very strong and very protective of women in the workplace. So because at some point they also form minorities. I know that in Ghana, for example, there is a 12-week provision post once a woman has a child and they have to go back to work. It's 2 weeks in other jurisdictions. I don't know if you have any current information regarding what the conversation is on the well terrain, because it's very difficult for some new mothers to go back to work at some point, and how do I balance career and raising a family at that point? And it's a big conversation. I don't want to go into it, but just very briefly, I don't know if you have any information on the current trends on their time off work after they've had a baby.
Okay. One good thing is that since COVID, everyone has appreciated working from home and use of technology.
I like the answer.
that creates the flexibility.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But yes, there was the men felt discriminated against because they were not getting paternity
leave.
Paternity leave.
It's a big conversation.
So that's a big conversation.
But the women say when the men take the paternity leave, they don't stay at home to take.
And that is and that may be true, but basically, so now even in Ghana here, there are organizations who may have at least 1 week paternity leave for the men to be able to appreciate, but the women, I like the way it works in my country here, because you're still given the 12 weeks to recuperate that before you come. It was less in East Africa. I remember in our policy in East Africa it was less. It was I think 14 days or something.
In some places, it's actually just 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks, yes, to that extent. And it hadn't changed.
Please, you're an employer, you're listening to us. If you don't have paternity leave in your policy, start the conversation, because very soon the minority, the men will say they are being treated. But I think that just to get the perspective, like you said, we've got Sam Kello Bloom. He's the CEO of Nomatu Consulting in Cape Town, South Africa. And he joins us today on Masterclass to be able to share some perspectives with us. A very good afternoon to you, Sam Kello, if you can hear me. Good afternoon to you, Sam.
Good afternoon. I can hear you perfectly well. Apologies. I'm in transit. I'm at Joburg OR Tambo Airport.
Brilliant. How's Joburg today?
Now the weather is better, but it's very cold on this
Hey,
side. I'm gonna try and put my camera on for the benefit of my brothers and sisters in
sorry.
Ghana.
Try and stay warm for us. So, you're live on Masterclass here. We're here with Martin and the team, and we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And today we decided to just have a chat, with you, get some, some perspective on what the situation is in the business areas, in the homes, in the workplaces in South Africa. What's your specific encounter? Maybe as case studies for us, so that it gives us perspective on the conversation and we're able to appreciate it a lot better. Just feel free to share with us whatever information you have in this regard, Sam.
No, thank you very much, and I'm pleased to also join Martin and you in this program. As you've mentioned, I'm from Nomadu Consulting, only focusing on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. 5 years now in the industry. For the first time now, we're seeing a lot of discussions around diversity, inclusion, and belonging in Africa as well. I'm fortunate to also do global work. The challenge we have, most literature on diversity, equity, and inclusion is only global for Asia, America. There's little literature for Africa. And also some of the challenges on diversity are not the same as global. So global, they will use words like unconscious bias. In Africa, we might have different challenges, which Martin might have mentioned, around culture, around ethnicity, around gender, around children. Interesting enough, children. I heard you talking about paternity leave. Is coming a lot on diversity in Africa as well. So that has been our experience. It's still growing, and most companies are now engaging on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, I must share with you, some people still don't know what it means. So there are some organizations that have an HR strategy, but when you read the HR strategy, you don't see any mention of what are they doing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Right. I mean, those are some wonderful thoughts. Martin, I don't know if you want to just chip in as well, before we let Sam go.
Yes, I mean,
Maybe we can ask him a few questions as well.
Yeah, we can ask him a few questions as well. And just picking up on what Sam is saying, and this is South Africa, and he's saying that now there are discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion, but lots of organizations have not ingrained it in their HR strategy, in their corporate strategy, and that is where we want to get to. Because if you don't include it intentionally, you unintentionally exclude it.
Yeah.
Sam, let me ask you this very quickly. Are there significant, should I say, examples that have probably, like cases that have gone to court or cases that have become the center of conversation in the media regarding a minority that thought that their employers were intolerant of their situation, which became a learning point or which became a catalyst for this conversation in South Africa?
There are certainly cases around gender, definitely around gender. Also cases around racism in the workplace, where people are saying, you cannot use that word, or you cannot treat me like this and treat other employees like this. But unfortunately, because this issue is very sensitive, some issues end up being swept under the carpet, or sometimes it becomes an amicable separation where we pay you to keep quiet and leave the organization. Going back to what Martin spoke about, HR people, sometimes you find a human resources person whose role is recruitment, and she's just given the role of diversity. There's no training and there's no guidance. So to answer your question, definitely there are significant cases, and we're going to see a lot of them coming up also around the racism, around gender equity, around working conditions. Another interesting one we saw with a global client of ours was the issue of salaries and remuneration. It amazes me how people want to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they don't want to discuss how salaries are part of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
You
Thank
know,
you.
I was actually going to ask that question about remuneration, but I mean, I assume
Yeah.
that at this point, once the conversation has started, it will be based on an equal opportunity employer. So it's based on your skill and your qualification. But it's interesting to hear that sometimes there are some of those cases where some of those intolerant decisions do take place. But again, let me ask you: in the few years that this conversation has become strong in South Africa, in the business terrain, with entrepreneurs, with business owners, with policymakers, with general managers, with CEOs, if you want to measure the two things, the depth of understanding and the need for this conversation vis-a-vis, the penchant for tolerance. Let's start from the second one. Do you think that there's a good level of tolerance where this conversation is concerned? And then number two, do you think that it then ties on to a deep understanding of why it becomes necessary for the purpose of growing our economy and our businesses?
Yeah. So on my side, in the work that we've been doing, I can certainly say that I don't speak for the 61 million South Africans. There's a tendency in my country to approach diversity, inclusion, and belonging from a compliance perspective, to do the tick box, but not to be influential, not to be relational. So sometimes we only do it because we just want to comply. So and that for me always worries me. It's not relational. So we don't worry about employee experiences around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that would be my answer on the first question that you have asked. Also, let's please not underestimate the role of leaders and managers on diversity and inclusion. I like the last question you've asked. Does diversity, equity, and inclusion impact the economy? When we have inclusive economies, they benefit young people, they benefit women, they benefit the disabled, and also we're able to go to new economies like solar energy, like fintech, like health and finance as well. So definitely, when we do diversity, we find new revenue streams. We also find new economies that we never thought of. A simple thing like how to make money out of waste, e.g., how to harness solar energy. So I agree with you 100%. Thank you.
One of my final questions, just before you go though, earlier on I was talking to Martin about the fact that in Ghana, our specific experiences that now there are identifiable groups of minorities. Over time, policy has come to bear, and then some of these people are receiving specific attention. For example, in the building code, for example, these days you won't get approval to put up a building without making provision for persons without disabilities. Granted that the process is slow, and granted that it's not as fast as we want it to be, do you think that in the general business populace, I'm talking about employees, I'm talking about the general population, do you get a sensing that people feel that even though the process is a little slow and they would have loved it to be slightly faster, at least something is being done, and at least there is hope for the future where this conversation is concerned? Do you get that sensing?
Yeah, so for me, my sense is that sometimes the bus is moving, but very slow to what you said. In South Africa, we've got a target of 2% at people with disabilities. Even government departments, some of them, not all, they struggle even just to meet 1% of that 2%. And the human heart and the human mind cannot keep on waiting for process and protocol. So we tend to have the rule, but then the action takes a while. Sometimes I tend to say it's so hard to legislate the heart, because you can employ me as a disabled employee, but not create the environment for me to succeed, not to think of me when it comes to promotion or talent management. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Your final words there. I just wanted to leave us with some fun thoughts. What should we not forget here in Ghana, learning from the example of South Africa? What's the one thing that we should not forget as we continue in this fight?
Firstly, I appreciate you saying learning from South Africa, but also I think Ghana is also rich on its own. It can also bring its own lessons. I really love when African countries are regional and they have their own solutions. Could be told some things we also did them wrong. So I don't want us to be the big brother that leads the lesson. And then the two words for me: being intentional. If we're gonna be doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's be intentional. And lastly, be intentional. And most importantly, Martin touched on it as well: gender equity. gender equity. Young girls must be exposed to aviation, to finance, to technology, artificial intelligence. Please, gender equity.
Thank you so much. That's Samkelo Bloom. He's the CEO of Nomatu Consulting
Thank you.
in Cape Town. He's taking time to join us this afternoon in Masterclass. Sam, thank you so much, and please keep warm. Don't catch a cold. This is Masterclass.
Thank you,
If you
sir.
just joined us, and we're having a
all the
conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're just joined by Samkelo Bloom from South Africa, sharing some thoughts on case studies on how this conversation pertains in South Africa. We take a quick message from our sponsors. When we come back, we get interactive.
Your favorite on-air business development program, Joy Business Masterclass, is in session, and you can interact with us on Facebook via the Joy 99.7 FM or Joy Business pages. If you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM or at Joy Business GH. Don't forget to hashtag JB Masterclass. You can also call us on 0302 216541 or send your questions and contributions through to the WhatsApp number 0551 111997, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back. If you have just tuned in, this is Masterclass here on your superstation Joy 99.7. We're interactive right now. Numbers to call 0302 216 541. That's 0302 216 541. You can also send us your comments on 055 1111997. That's 055 1111997. If you're driving, please do not text while you drive. We definitely want you to arrive alive, but otherwise pick up that phone, give us a call, 0302 216 541. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. What are your specific experiences? These things are happening in our workplaces. If we don't talk about them, we will not learn. We will not become better for it. Let's not hide it. Pick up that phone. Let's share thoughts. Let's become better for it. If you have any motor vehicle of any kind, then I've got some great news for you from Goyle. What do you do when you run out of fuel in your vehicle? Do you just stop anywhere? If that's what you do, then please don't do that anymore. Let us introduce you to the Good Energy family and why you must be a part of it. Goyle Super XP Ron 95 and Diesel XPs are the best quality fuels with high performance in town for your vehicle. Goyle Super XP Ron 95 is a high-grade fuel sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goyle's Diesel XP is low in sulfur, making it an eco-friendly option for your vehicle. With over 440 stations across the nation, join the family that rewards you with quality for an energized driving experience. Goyle, Good Energy. Goyle, Yenara, Yedia. Phone lines are still open. Please pick up that phone, give us a call. Let's be a part of today's conversation so that we can share our thoughts. 0302 216 541 or send us your comments on 055 11997. Martin, while we're waiting for those phone lines to ring, quick reaction to Samkelo's comments, and then maybe we can just finish off the rest of the content while we wait for the phone lines to ring. Yes.
Very profound
thoughts he shared, isn't it?
Absolutely, very profound thoughts he shared, and interesting that he mentioned that he does not want to play the big brother role, because South Africa is so totally different from us. They are so diverse. It is not funny, and they came from an environment of apartheid.
Exactly.
So for them, they were on the other side of the normal line when it comes to diversity, but they managed to crawl back. Indeed. For us, we actually were more together, and then now have drawn a few lines and are coming together again. So
and either ways, because we've been together, somehow my thought process is that our complacency also creates our own intolerance levels at different points.
Exactly.
Same way on the other side of the conversation, their forced division also creates intolerance on some point. Whichever way you look at it, no one gets away free.
No one gets away free, and because of that, you realize that the solutions are different from different angles. They went through a situation where, because of black empowerment, so now you need to put a black person on your in your organization, your payroll at some point, and it was reported that some people would put the names of their drivers and things like that just to be able to be compliant. That kind of thing. Where when you come to this environment, we have not even experienced that before. So we keep going. And because of that, it is easy for me to snub somebody who comes from another region, for me to insist that because I'm a man, a woman shouldn't do this, and we kind of find it acceptable. Or even if we don't say it, we do it subtly. and then it gets into their own minds as well, and they also decide that I'm not going to
I like the
compete for
passion
this.
with which he harped on the fact that we should expose our young girls more to aviation, to finance, to all the technical things. And I mean, I think I must take this opportunity and commend our people over time, for should I say concerted effort on girl child education, on gender,
Yes.
to all,
On STEM.
all my people, all my
Yes.
mothers who are fighting, on that side. Well done. I mean, I think that it gives us a very good example as a country and puts us in very good stead.
Yeah,
A very good stead.
and there's some very serious ladies in technology this time. Yeah,
Indeed. I know a few of them.
exactly. So I mean, it makes you feel proud that we're
Yeah.
doing something, but we could still do more.
Indeed. Phone lines are still open. Numbers to call 0302216541. Please pick up that phone. Let's have a conversation. Let's hear your thoughts. What's your specific experience? At your own level, what are the things that you're intolerable of, or others around you are intolerable of? And how can we talk about it and make it better? If we talk about it enough, we'll find solutions, and then we can be able to make it better. If you sweep it under the carpet, diversity is one of those things. It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
Because, I mean, a leopard cannot change its spots, but it can learn to live with others
Yes.
once a certain conversation is had. I think there were a few more thoughts that we wanted to share on teamwork and
Yes.
team commitment. Maybe we should just go ahead and share that.
Yes. So, so if you look at it in an organization, you have a certain goal that you want to reach, and you're working as a team to get there. What is a team? Like a small number of diverse people with complementary skills, and therefore you are all committed to that purpose. When you're in your organization and you realize that there's some sort of complaints, conflicts between personnel, and lack of clear goals, confusion, loss of productivity, etc., then you know that you need to actually work on a team. Now, we have to look at it from these kind of lenses. Look at it from a football team. Every person has a role
In the team. Yeah.
in a team. So everyone can't be the goalkeeper. Otherwise, you have penalties throughout. You have the left back. You have the right back. You have the left wing, right wing. You center forward. Everyone has a role, and everyone needs to be enabled to be able to play their role. How do you enable all of this? Last week we mentioned that it's about 2 R's: relationship and respect.
There's something that I saw, on your slide. It says, strength lies in our differences, not in our similarities. That's
Yes.
an interesting one.
Exactly. In fact, it is said that if you have diversity, it actually is an advantage, because it's like looking at what do you call it, a jigsaw puzzle. Everyone has a concave and everyone has a convex, and they have to fit in nicely for you to get a big picture. And that is where the strength lies in. So if you're all the same, if you're all penguins, you'll be doing things the same way. But if there are a few peacocks, a few sparrows, a few ostriches, a few
And then say some gorillas.
and some gorillas, then you will see that some eagles.
Yes.
Then you see that everyone has a role to play.
Yeah, because in the
within organization.
ecosystem where you exist, all these things are there.
Yes.
So the more of them you have in your proximity, the better. Because
yes.
you're used to them, you know how to deal with them, and then when they show up, it doesn't become... Because one day you're going to hire somebody who's the best technology person to do some kind of work, but he's a gorilla.
Yes.
And you're all penguins, and you've never seen a gorilla before.
You'll be surprised. Yeah. I mean, look, an experience that we had some time back in Deloitte. I mean, for me, the star of that day, we're writing a proposal to deliver, and we needed to meet the deadlines. The star of that day was the, what do you call it, the motor rider. The courier who managed to get the document to the client's place right on time, and I was wondering how he did it. And if he was not part of the team, imagine I was supposed to drive through there, and then with all this kind of traffic and things. I mean, my respect for him on that day just shot through the roof, and the commitment. So everybody has a role, and because everyone has a role, we need to pay attention to everyone's needs. We need to make sure that the relationship is there, the respect is there. But more to the point, the responsibility, everybody also has a responsibility for the team, not only for the organization as well. So that is what makes the teams successful.
At the micro level.
So level.
It's to the organization, but it's also to your team.
Exactly. So everybody's role has specific requirements. So people will want to play their role. Don't let someone come and play your role for you. Let him do that specific requirement. But you are supposed to enable them and support them. So if you look at soccer, players understand their position. They understand what they are doing, in where they are aware of what is required. And of course, they also know the boundaries of their roles. And they also function better if they have other people supporting them. And if the enablement is there. The other thing is that we need to be able to, in a team, you need to be able to trust each other. So if someone comes in and he begins to mistrust you only because you are behaving in a certain way, which is part of those microaggressions, you need to, if you are not aware, it becomes a problem. You have let's say maybe a Caucasian as part of your team. He speaks with an accent. He comes and he speaks the accent, and then there's somebody sitting there. The receptionist looks at you and says, right in front of him, and then you also laugh. He feels like you are.
It's denigrating.
Yes, and then suddenly he doesn't trust the two of you anymore. He decides to work in his own in his own hole. So those are the things that.
As you are saying this, there's an example that has just come to my mind about. Some people. These days a lot of people are raising their kids and they're speaking English at home and they're not teaching them the local language.
Yes, that's true.
A friend of mine said to me, one day he was talking to his wife and he started speaking the local language, and their daughter came up and said, "Are you speaking Akan because you don't want me to hear what you don't want me to hear what you're saying?"
Yeah, no, you see, and this is even just a little bit of what, and this is your own daughter, and next time you're speaking Akan, he does not trust what you're saying or what you're going to do.
It's like whenever you don't want me to hear, then you switch. In certain homes, whenever you don't want, father or the mother to, then you switch the meter band.
Exactly. My mom didn't used to speak Ga very well, but if she didn't want us to hear, she'd speak Ga to whoever she's
talking to.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So basically, I just wanted to raise the point that even trust is also essential. If you have all of that in mind, people have their roles, they have their responsibilities. You give them the kind of respect, and then you build relationships with them. Then they tend to trust you. And then you're able to coordinate your purposes properly. And that should be the foundation of DIB in an organization. You say that the foundation binds the people together, particularly when a team is under pressure, because they know that they can trust you. And the deeper the trust, the better. They say the deeper the foundation, the higher you can build.
There's something here. I've got just about 2 minutes on the clock. There's something here on your slides that talks about stages of team development. And I just wanted you to just touch on it real quick. The context, the conflict, and the coercion. And I like the questions that are there. Why am I here? How will we do it?
Yeah, okay. So the stages of team development, there are two of them that I had put in. One is the typical Tokman model, which talks about forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjusting.
Yes.
And if you are looking at your DIB policies, you need to know, consider it whilst you're forming, whilst you're storming. Yeah. And then the Drexler-Sibet model is the one that looks at orientation, trust building, goal vision, looks at commitment, implementation, and then high performance and renewal. Right. The orientation, trust building, and goal clarification is the context stage, where you are actually more like you're forming. When you bring the team together, you need to build trust. You need to orient them as to what they are doing, and then people will start, wanting to know where exactly do I belong. Then that means they have kind of shifting into a conflict stage where it's there. That you call the storming.
Yeah.
Okay. So under there, you see that people would want to now be able to commit. It is only when they commit that you can get them to start implementing, and then after that, then you can see that the team is now performing much better. You have to go through all the stages. If you miss one stage, you will probably come back. And then if you miss the storming stage, you
definitely come back and start again.
And storm again.
I think that we should find time, maybe later in the year, maybe my producer will bring you back again and we can have this conversation again, maybe like a part 2 of it. Because there's so much,
so much to talk
that
about.
we're unable to cover. But I believe we've also done quite a bit in the last 4 weeks. We've talked about a lot of things.
Yes.
What are the takeouts, maybe just 3 Just three, just punchy takeouts.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
should we remember from this conversation on DEIB? Just three punchy takeouts, if you will.
To start with, the conversation has to start within the organization. The awareness is what will
Talk about it, let it be
about
known, bring it out in the open.
Exactly. And then you should be aware that everyone has a bias one way or the other.
Everyone
has a bias one way. Just be aware of it and make sure that the person sitting next to you doesn't feel like you are denigrating him or her, or you're not paying attention to his or her needs. And then finally, as we kept saying that if you intentionally, how do we put it? We said if you unintentionally exclude, you will only
just pay attention to it and be intentional.
Exactly.
About
if you unintentionally include, you will intentionally exclude. Yeah.
Yes. Wow. So much information there. One of the things that has stayed with me in this whole conversation is the quote by Cory Booker, and that says, "The lines that divide us are not as strong as the lines that bind us." That's what we leave you with in this conversation on the DEIB. This has been Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Belonging here on Masterclass for the last 4 weeks with Martin Atafin, CEO of Afri Consultant. It's been a very profound conversation. I hope that you've been able to pick up some thoughts for your management skill at work, and hopefully you're going to be a better manager, a bit more tolerant, understanding DEIB. Hopefully we'll bring you a second edition at some point later on. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and being such a wonderful audience. God willing, we come your way with yet another exciting edition of Masterclass next week. Thank you for listening.